Welcome, listeners, to Attention is the Currency. The podcast is about people who are building real businesses and making an impact. We focus on how they get noticed, stay consistent, and create real value. And I'm your host, Daniel Brimmelcombe. And on this episode, we have Mr. Brett O'Connor joining us. Brett has been my personal friend for many years. We've done a lot of business things together as well. But Brett has built. Today's guest is someone who's not just built businesses, but has helped others build them too. With over 30 years in franchising, business development, and training, Brett O'Connor is the founder of Inception Network, a platform that helps contractors and sole traders grow into profitable micro businesses. He's also spent more than a decade creating simulated business environments that have turned into real trading companies. Brett's work has supported countless startups into becoming sustainable, compliant, and ready to scale. This is someone who doesn't just teach business, he builds it. Welcome, Brett. Thank you for joining us on Attention is the Currency.
Yeah, that's good. And I guess it's, something like I say, if you want to get attention, you got to pay attention. And that's something that I've definitely worked out in the last 30 years in business, because it's amazing the amount of people and startups and all this sort of thing that you sort of see them in the early days and they've got no idea what they're doing, but neither did I when I was working as an area manager in my early 20s. Owning my first business when I was 21. So,
well, that brings us to our first question, Brett, is how you got started in business.
Well, I guess I actually, people say, well, when did I start working? And yes, I worked for McDonald's and all this sort of stuff, but I actually started in the swimming pool canteen working with my mum before I went to school. I'd give change from $1 before I could count to 10. So I've always been in a working environment. Cooking hot chips, standing on 2 milk crates. You wouldn't see all this sort of thing today, but that was just standard back then. But I sort of got into business through basically by accident. Went down to uni. I was going to become a school teacher, believe it or not. I guess I've come full circle because I'm still delivering Diploma of Business in school. And I was working at a Donut King next to a cinema. And, I wasn't happy with uni. And in my first year, just to give you an idea of how well I was going at uni, I was actually the social coordinator, and that's where I think I found my entrepreneurial background, organising events. And the guy that owned the Donut King said, look, we're looking at buying another shop. Do you want to go into business with it? And it turned out that it was a coffee shop in Westfield or Chatswood. And he didn't go in with me, but the early directors of Retail Food Group were impressed with the way that I ran the business and my entrepreneurial spirit and all this sort of thing. And they actually co-signed the lease with me so that I could buy the business off their franchisee, take it out of the franchise system, and ran Coyotes Coffee and Carvery at Westfield at Chatswood in the food court when I was 21. So that's how I got into business, I guess. And I've just used that experience, and through those connections and meeting those people, I actually went back and worked for franchise groups like Michelle's Patisserie and all this sort of stuff. Other ones like this. I started with a crate franchise, wrote the operations manual, took it overseas, left that, came back, worked at Scenic World as a tourist resort, worked on Hayman Island, all these wonderful locations and all this sort of thing. Different story when you're working there and living there, but it's just something that it stuck back with me that the most fun I had is when I was doing the work myself. And this is where I prefer to work with solopreneurs and startups. And when they get to the stage where they scale up, I send them up to people like you who can really help them take off in their business.
Yeah, well, that's the passion started early from childhood, as most of us entrepreneurs did.
Well, I just didn't know any different. That's the thing.
Well, my thing's a little bit different on that, where I sort of had to fight to get into those kind of opportunities early. But what do you learn early on in the franchising that still sticks with you? Because you moved into that area, and it's a big part of your early days of you sort of, because some business owners go into more of creating the systems all from scratch, and you more do that these days of the scratch. But what really sticks with you from that early learning of franchising?
Well, I guess it come down to store openings. We opened about 100 food outlets with the different franchise groups that I worked out. And what we used to say is, whatever you do on the first day, just smile and don't panic because it's already too late. You've just got to work with what you've got. And this is where I think that people always, when they're starting a business, they go, they're never ready. And, perfection's the enemy of profit. And just get in there and have you please get degrees, as they said at uni. So I just go hit 50%, And you'll be surprised that when what your 50% is actually 100% to what other people can do when you get out there and have a go. And I think that that's the thing, is just get in there and have a go. And nowadays, before, 16-year-old kids or 15-year-old kids come and work and making coffee, they've got to do a barista course and everything like this sort of thing. We would give them 30 minutes training the day before we open the shop, and they would be making coffee for the customers these days. And this was working with judges of the World Barista Championship that used to own the coffee arm of Michelle. And they would say, customers would come up and say, "Oh, can you make a coffee for me?" And they go, "Well, he does a good enough job, and this is one of the judges of the World Championship, Yep. So it just comes down to, if you manage people's expectations and you just go, let's just do this. And they get in there and have a go, and that's how they learn. That's how you accelerate your learning. 70% of your knowledge comes from actually getting there and doing it. And like Gary Vee said, just get out there and do it. And, there's Elon Musk, we don't want to talk about him too much. He's gone out of favor with a lot of people, but he said there's too many people with MBAs running companies these days, and they really overthink things.
Yeah, that's really the lesson that you're bringing out of that you, in the early days, you didn't really know what you were doing, but getting in and having a go is always the self-starting way. It's
well, no one does. And it was because I was working with, different franchisees, and one of the franchisees in my area was the daughter-in-law of Westfield's retail director. And she said to me, "Is it okay if I bring along my father-in-law to this meeting?" I didn't have a clue who he was, and I got back after the meeting and I went into my boss at Michelle's and I said, "Who's Graham Marr?" And he just went, What, why are you asking that? He says, "Oh, I was just in a meeting with him." And he said, "What are you doing in this meeting?" And the directors were having a heart attack. And my boss pulled me aside and said, "Look, if you're going to have a meeting with this," I didn't know who he was, just treated him like a normal person. I thought, this guy sounds like he knows what he's talking about, asking questions. And he's sitting back halfway through going, his daughter-in-law's thinking he's going to bring along his dad and he's going to tell me what's for it. And I sat there and I said, "Well, no, this is what you got to do to build your business," and went through it. And he said, no, keep going. Just listen to him. When I got back into the office, he said, I was getting grilled because I was having these meetings and everything else. And then one of the directors comes in and goes, "Sam, it's okay. I've just got a phone call from Graham." He said, "I don't care what you tell my franchisee anymore, as long as you send that bloke out there to do it." And I thought, well, that's sort of an example. And this is what all of these directors of the big companies, when they started out, they didn't know what they were doing. They had a plan, but they would be changing a plan every day. But the thing is that they would be paying attention to what the customers wanted, but at the same time, too, it's realistic. It's like Henry Ford said, if I'd listened to my customers, I would have made faster horses. And I think that's something with the friends. It's a bit of a balancing act, but this is where people either go one way too far. You've got to be adaptable. You've got to be able to think on your feet. And at the end of the day, you've got to know who to say no to, because not everyone's your customer, which is the other thing there too. This is what we do. This is what our customers are happy with, and work out, just serve the 20% of the customers that give you 80% of the profit. And then the rest of the business will start to look after itself.
Yeah, definitely. Well, after all this experience, Brett, what got you to start Inception Network? What made you, what put you into that position?
I guess it's frustration. I mean, and this is where you and I, when we're dealing with businesses that are up and running, we say to them, "Why don't you just do this?" And they go, "Oh, they don't know how." And they don't know if they set up their business correctly, or they've basically done their research and all of this sort of stuff. And it's not that hard to do the research. And this is what, we spoke about, the simulated businesses. We started local home and garden repairs because I wanted to have something which was a simulated business environment. There was a multi-site one. We're all talking about setting up tradesmen. They go to TAFE and they learn the trade, but no one teaches them how to run a business or how to set up a business. And this is where they get into the industry. They're doing bad deals. They're losing money. And then they come to me and it's like, well, I can't really do anything for you. They need to come to someone like you who can set up all the automated systems and all of this sort of stuff. But they don't know who the customers are. They don't know, what's their unique selling point. They don't know what their customers will pay extra for. And this is the big thing. Everyone does what everyone will pay for. But if you know what your customers will pay extra for, this is the one thing that I talk with startups. Just focus on not what people will pay for, what they'll pay extra for. And if that just happens to be what you love doing, then you've got a viable business.
Yeah, definitely. So given the frustration and kicking off the business, essentially sharing the information is always our key, whether we give it away for free or we're actually in a consulting position.
Yeah.
So how do you primarily put this in place to help the contractors and the sole traders grow?
Well, I guess that, I sort of use my experience, and this is what it just comes back to. The simplest thing is to just do it. That's how you learn. That's how you learn whether it works or not. And this is where it comes into, there's a lot of startup training courses, and you go to university and do a degree in entrepreneurship or a PhD. Even I've met these people. But at the end of the day, what do you need to start a business? You need to basically get an ABN. You need to go out there and find out what your customers want, what they're willing to pay you for, what they're willing to pay extra for. And what do you love doing is the thing as well. What skills do you actually have? And I'm not talking about, I love doing this, because if you're doing what you love, that's your best option always. And you're always going to get better at it because you love doing it. So if you love what you do, you're probably not going to do it if you're not getting paid for it. So that's an okay option. But your worst option is when people say to me, "Oh, I need to do this." And I'm like, "Well, why do you need to do it?" "Oh, because I need to make money." So you're starting a business to make money, and that puts a lot of pressure on them. But if they're doing it because they love doing it and they're not sure how to monetize it, well, this is where, we just go out there, and I work with people like yourself, and you can always find customers for them. But they need to know enough about themselves and be able to sell themselves before people are even going to think of buying them.
Yeah. Let's talk about real world scenarios, Brett. What's a recent success of a business that you're working with at the moment, and what did you implement in there? And let's talk about that. What's a recent success story about how?
A lot of the ones I tend to work with now seem to be in some form of education, whether it's industry education, this sort of stuff. A lot of IT, AI businesses, these sort of things. But they're basically, I guess, looking at, they've got some sort of skill. And, this is where I work with the T's and C's lawyer that does their custom drafting contracts and all this sort of stuff. And basically the ones that are succeeding are doing things like they love. I know that there's a art teacher. She was an art teacher. Her husband passed away, and she started up teaching art as a mental health process to make, so that was how their business did art classes, because that was good for people's mental health. And, COVID hit, and obviously she couldn't do face-to-facing, but sort of kept it going. And now she's going and that business is going on 5 years later. And she wouldn't be here if she didn't just have someone in a corner going, or just do this, or you can do this, or you can do this online and all this sort of stuff. But she got herself ready for when she could get people onto her site into her art studio again. Instantly, she just started booking people in again. And this is where there's other ones that are looking in the training industry. And it's more so training businesses. They start off thinking, I want to deliver training for an RTO. Then they work out that that's not where the money is. So they look at, online courses. And I might use my instructional design background to say, well, you want to give away the why and the what you do, but you don't give away the how, and you definitely don't give away the what if. Unless they're your premium clients, and actually structure it and go, well, okay, well, what's your product? What's your placement in the market? What's your price you can charge? It's going to depend on where you're placed in the market. And then it's actually harder to not promote your business if you get those three right than it is to promote these days. And this is where it just comes in. And you mentioned hundreds of the businesses. A lot of this stuff you do for free. It's only if there's someone coming in and they, I work with a lot of people like yourself, and they need you to come in and do their website or something like that. I tend to get them started, get them online, and get them going through it. And then they might give me some work in doing training or doing some graphic design or things like this for them, just because, they don't think that they can afford someone to do it. But this is where I would come in and go through with them. And a lot of them don't like them saying that I'm doing the work for them, because I've sort of got a bit of a reputation that if you can't afford anyone else, come to Brett and he'll teach you how to do things for free. And this is what I teach them to do. But when they start doing things for themselves and they get in there, they get the 70% of the knowledge that they need. So when they go and talk to someone like yourself, this is where you get quicker results from them.
Yeah. Well, then we put a virtual assistant in place, and we're really scaling, because they're taking all those $10 tasks off their list that they now have revenue to do.
Yep. And this is the thing that I'm finding is that people come to me and say, I want to learn how to use AI. And I go, well, the whole point of AI is that you don't have to learn how to use it. You either use it or you don't. So what's this? Why do you want to use AI is the question. And this is where AI doesn't take jobs. People that use AI do. And this is where the whole virtual assistant industry should be all out of business. But they pivoted, as they say in startup land, and they've learned how to use the AI, knowing that business owners want to learn how to use it because they're interested in it, but they're still going to want to pay someone to do it. And this is why virtual assistants have actually taken off again. Whereas people are going to say, oh, no, you can get an AI to do this. You don't need a virtual assistant.
Well, I saw a good quote a couple of weeks ago, and it was that AI just makes you 20% smarter. So if you're not intelligent and you're not able to do the thing already, you're not able to use AI. AI just gives you that extra 20% on what you're already doing, and that's what I'm finding. A lot of business owners that I talk to is that they go, "Oh, AI doesn't work for me." It's because they don't have the foundation of the knowledge of what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
So you don't get the best result. And if you don't know what you're looking for, you can't say if it's good or not. And AI is not quite there yet that it can quite self-judge itself without your input.
Well, I did a coaching session with my students yesterday, year 11 students, and I said to them, here's what it's like when you're using ChatGPT. And I said to them, and Daniel, get me to tell you the time. How would you get me to tell you the time?
What's the time?
It's a unit of measurement.
Yeah.
And I said, so is that the answer you wanted? And they went, oh, no. I said, okay, well, let's try again. And he said, well, what's the time now? And I said, it's still a unit of measurement because ChatGPT doesn't know what the time is. It doesn't know when it is unless you tell it.
Yeah.
And this is what the kids at school get it. If you break it down and it's that simple to them, and then all of a sudden I did a coaching session on using AI to do their coursework. And we have to do that as part of the course now to teach them how to use AI because employers expect that they know how to use ChatGPT. But it just so happens that they've got 5 hours worth of work done in 1.5 hour lesson.
Yeah.
So they don't have any homework this week because they did it all using ChatGPT in the lesson. And this is what we have to teach them as part of the course.
Yeah. Well, it's very essential because the tasks that I've knocked out in a short period of time because that used to take me days or many hours. It's But we're not gonna touch too much on AI today because that's a whole hour's worth of chat there. But we're gonna go to the sort of simulated businesses, and I know that you and I work on the local home and garden repairs, and that was a simulated business that we sort of kicked off as well that I've assisted you with, and now we've taken it into a bit of a different direction. And so really, the next question is around evolving that into a real business. Which is you can talk about how you did that and how we did that together. Well,
this is where there's a big hole in the market. There's a lot of the lawn mowing businesses and all this sort of stuff. They're calling themselves landscaping business, but they're basically a home garden repair business or handyman business. Is where they get their main stuff on. The construction companies get all of the big jobs and this sort of stuff. So I went back to my franchising background and went, okay, well, when you go and you buy a mowing franchise or something like that, they give you 2 weeks training and then they send you out there. Well, how do you do that? Well, you've got to buy like 10 grand's worth of equipment and they teach you how to use the equipment. Just like when we're starting a business, we teach them how to use ChatGPT, but you don't have to pay for it unless you pay for the subscription, but that's only $20. So starting a marketing business is a lot cheaper. But without the strategy and actually getting out there and seeing what you've got to do and boots on the ground and actually doing the jobs. And that's where we went. We knew that we had good SEO because we started to get all the spammers attracted to the website and the contact forms. And that's blown up now since I started working with you. But that's just all part of that. That's how you know that you've got good SEO from the start. And when I was looking at, well, what are we going to call this business? I looked at the word home and garden maintenance. There was 250 businesses registered with home and garden maintenance in it. But there was only 7 businesses with home and garden repairs when I put those keywords in. So that's what we registered the business as, local home and garden repairs. And then the domain name home and garden repairs was available.com.au.
Yeah.
So snap that up.
Lucky. Yeah.
and went in there and I had, professional marketers, not just Daniel, but others as well going, how the hell did you get that? And I said, when I said, and they went, but didn't you do any more research on that? And I said, no, I set this simulated business up and the whole idea of it in basically about 24 hours and registered the business name and everything else and launched it. and then went to people like Daniel and said, hey, I've got this great idea. And they sort of had to think about it. And, I got ChatGPT to help me write a business model canvas and then a business plan and actually publish that online. And we launched it in Logan, where there's a market there for 85% dwellings, detached dwellings. So a lot of them have got gardens and all this sort of thing in Logan. It's cheap rent. And so they've got disposable income to pay someone to come in and do their lawns. So this is the sort of research that I was looking at doing to build the business. And there was actually the council, people working for council come and said to me, mate, why don't you actually start this business up and start doing the lawn mowing work? So that's what I did this summer when we had all the rain and everything else. We just got, you jump on Airtasker and all this sort of thing, and people were paying, $300 to mow the lawn because all the gardening businesses were so busy. And it's went, supply and demand. Now it's coming into winter. They've got to pivot. And it comes into, well, yes, it's a seasonal business. So what do you do in the off season? And this is where it comes into, this is where you do all the construction work and everything else. You replant the gardens and, create veggie patches and all this sort of thing. And this is what we're doing is we're actually coming up with not what people would pay for, because they're going to pay you to do their lawn, but what are they going to pay extra for? And they'll pay you extra for convenience coming out because they've got a party on the weekend and just going that little bit extra mile. It might take you an extra half an hour to do it. But if I'm getting $50 to do training and I'm getting $100 an hour to do someone's garden, well, you don't mind. You come in, you go do the garden, go out. I mean, it's not a bad business, but it's not what I love doing. So this is where it's gone to. We're going to get people in that do love doing that, and that's all they want to do. And we're going to go
the scalability of the business. Yes, and now we're going nationwide and allowing other people to start those businesses. So it's gone from simulated to show people they could. Yeah. Now it's.
But we still needed to get the testimonials from real customers, even for the simulated business. Yes. Because if you create a simulated business for training, in the qualification framework, it's got to be based on a real world business. So you can't just go and rip off Jim's mowing or something like that. You have to actually go out there and you have to create a business which is distinctly different. So you're not stealing these companies' IP that they've worked very hard to protect. So this is where it comes into. So basically, you've got to start up a business, which is what I do.
Yeah. And it will just keep scaling from there. We're gonna shoot over to your training experience, to vet and training experience. Because what have you learned from your time as a vet trainer and compliance consultant?
Well, the main thing is
that's not a short question. That's a
the main thing is currency is king. What are businesses doing? You've got to get out there and talk to businesses. I mean, the diploma of business, the units were written in 2020 before COVID. So, RTOs have got one job to do, which is to go out and talk to employers and find out what are the requirements of that thing and which ones they actually want to teach the students how to do. And this is where it comes down to the thing that I learned from the vocational education and training, which is what VET stands for. Got a different meaning for me when I take my cats to the vet. But the main thing is the qualification is not the outcome. What they can do with the qualification is the outcome. If everything you do from a compliance perspective, you're not going to have any trouble with the regulator if it's based on getting the student work experience or getting the student a job. And one of the issues that's come into it at the moment is that 80% of graduates with a qualification that apply for a position are seen as not suitable based on their qualification alone. They want them to have 2 years or at least 2 years on the job experience after they've done their qualification before they'll look at giving them a job. And this is where when we do the training, we say we don't just train you how to start up your business. We train you how to start a business by starting a business with you. What I do with my year 11 students, I came in and the first thing I said to them was, you're no longer a student. You work for me. And told them the simulated business. I'm the HR manager. Your teacher is the site manager. She's got the ability to, to sack you out of this course if you don't do the work. But I'm going to tell her how that she can get rid of you out of the class. So if you don't work for me, then, this is what's going to happen when you go into the workplace. And this is where they said, well, I'm a facilitator. So what's my role when I come into the class? A facilitator is to facilitate something is to make it easier, not harder. So, this is where I go in and they went from being 2 weeks behind to 2 weeks in front in 2 weeks. So there's a 4-week turnaround just because I went in there and I treated them like an employee, like I would do when I would open up a store and I would come in and say,
well, it's important to. Well, it's like they say in anything else. You sweat in the training in order not to bleed on the battlefield.
Yeah. Well, you get 10% of your knowledge comes from formal training courses. 20%, the next 20% comes from coaching and mentoring programs and that sort of thing. Then the 70% comes when you've got to go out there and you've got to think of how am I going to do this myself? And that's why we went out there and we started mowing lawns and all this sort of stuff until your boots on the ground and you're talking to the customers and you're asking them, are you happy with this? And then you find out that, they're just happy with this. They're just happy if you do the work. And it's basically 5 minutes extra work for them to pay you. And that's what they're going to pay you $100 extra for. So that makes it a pretty profitable business. But without those testimonials, without that experience, this is where people have a preconceived idea. If they just come and get someone off Airtasker, then they're assuming they don't know what they're doing, even if they run a professional business. So this is where I come in. And a lot of the early comments and the feedback was that he was professional, very professional. This word kept coming up because I treated it like I was a professional, including wearing the high-vis shirt and all this sort of stuff. And they just said, I came and acted like a professional. A professional asked, what do you want? What's going to make you happy? And let's just do that first of all. And then we'll see if we've got time to do all the other stuff, which is nice to do. But if we don't have time to do it, then we'll come back again. And they always invite you back. That's how you get repeat customers.
Yeah. Final question around the training and compliance section. How do you balance sort of compliance with profitability for a business?
Well, it's actually, if you are doing what businesses don't want to pay people to do the 100%. They want to pay them. They want to pay experts to do 80%. They want to save that 20% for their difficult customers that they need to put in 100%. But what most businesses do is that they're employing staff. They just want them to get the 50%. Now, the competency-based training or vocational education and training qualifications, it's either can they do the job or not. There's no how well they can do the job. So this is where it comes into. It's actually quite easy to exceed the expectations in vocational training and compliance than it is at university. Because university, you get credits, you get distinctions, and there's so many different things that you can do, and there's all these marking rubrics. All I care about is can they do the job or not from an employee's perspective. So what would you be happy with and what would you pay them to do? Then we find out, well, I can pay them to do this, this, and this. You get a list of this big. But then I say, what would you pay them extra to do? And they would be this and this and this. And I go, well, my school kids can already do that. So this is where it's not, if you're doing what employers want, you're going to be compliant and you're not going to have any trouble in the audit. And it's actually going to take you longer. It's going to take you longer to try and teach them things that employers don't want because they're not going to get a chance to practice it. So they're not going to get that 70% of knowledge. So you're spending a lot of your time and effort on the 10% of knowledge that they're probably never going to use. And this is where the more real world the training is, the more compliant it is by definition, because you've got employers saying, well, they didn't teach them this. Yes, it says it in the training package. They told them about it, but they also told them, yeah, but just do this instead. Now we do this. Now we use ChatGPT. Now we do this, and they get the job done in about 20% of what the time was 5 years ago when the training package was written.
Yeah. Well, we got a few snap fire questions just to finish up the session, Mr. Brett. And one book or resource that's shaped your approach that you could recommend.
I think the one I remember is Think and Grow Rich.
Yes, very good book. One of the first books I ever read and finished. Phenomenal book. And
it's what probably another one is The Secret. The Subtle Art of Not Giving a F.
Yeah,
if you can say that. And that's about sticking to your values. This is what it's not about not caring what people think. It's not that you don't care, it's that you can't care. And there's a big difference in that. This is what we do. This is my values, and being, sticking to that. And, this is how you decide who's not your customer, which is the 20% that cause you 80% of the problems. If you go out and chase them, you get to 25%, and all of a sudden 100% of your time is taken up with fixing problems. You can't build your business and you're in survival mode. And this is usually where businesses start going broke.
Well, it's
So this
really
is what,
yeah,
yeah,
a life by design, really. So
yeah, and that's coming from
yeah,
this book with a an out there title, but at the end of the day, when you read the book, it's nothing about what people think
yeah,
it is.
yeah,
So
that's it. Because you actually care about a lot, but you leave aside all the things that aren't important to you, really, that you shouldn't be caring about.
yeah, well, it's
Yeah,
it's
I remember the book very well. It's
yeah.
it's very good. But yeah, worst advice you hear new business owners getting.
Worst advice. Yeah. This is where I hear them say that when you start up a business, you've got to employ staff and all this sort of thing. 61% of all businesses these days are non-employing businesses. So they don't have any staff, but they've all got a contractor, a VA or an accountant or a bookkeeper or something like that. So technically they employ staff, but they're not employees. But this is where a lot of businesses go broke. The Business Chamber Queensland says that the biggest barrier to growth by their members is 61% or something like that, says the ability to attract and retain staff is actually the biggest barrier to growth. So the business coaches out there that say, look, when you start a business, you've got to set it up. You've got to plan to have 3 or 4 staff, but they're not actually skills matching them to what the owner's job roles are. That's just bad advice. And that's the quickest way to go broke as far as I'm concerned, right from startup.
Yes, finding the right team is always essential.
Yep.
It took me a long time to get the right people to be backing me up.
Well, that's where we developed a skills, talk about compliance. We developed a skills check or a skills matching system. It's based on the qualification framework, the measure that they're supposed to be using. None of them do, by the way, even the Queensland government training. But this is the skill check that we use. And guess what? It maps to DISC profiling, personality types, and all of this sort of stuff as well. Yeah. So this is where my compliance history is coming out there. It's 14 questions. What jobs do you want the staff to do? And they can write a proper job description based on what work they want them to do. Forget about what the job name is, because you can go to university and they'll tell you this job does this and everything else. But at the end of the day, it is as simple as that. And you do it in your head. You don't need to use the skills matching system. But a lot of people don't know what skills are.
Yeah. Oh, it's taken a lot of years, a lot of books myself read. But one thing you wish you knew earlier in your career.
Oh, just do it.
Just do it. So
stop it. Don't listen to your family and friends.
That's good advice. Because the ones that never take the plunge, that are always saying, "Oh, don't do that. Just stay safe. Just do what everyone else does."
How do you know what your best is until you've done it?
Yeah.
Yeah. People say, "I'm trying my best." I said, "So you've given up on trying to do better?" Okay. Well, why don't you retire? I wish I could retire, but
what's the old saying of the entrepreneur? Jump off the cliff and build the parachute on the way down.
Well, the edge isn't the edge; it's the starting point, really. For that's an old skiing term we used to use.
Most underrated skill in business right now.
I would say empathy, and that's a lot of servings. I ask them about the 14 skills, which ones are most important, and personal skills. They all say, this is what it's underrated. They don't see that as being essential for building businesses, but this is what salespeople do. There's 5 different types of empathy that's used in the 5 steps of buyer behavior. So if you've got a sales funnel, how can you not have empathy? If you don't have empathy, your sales funnel is just not going to work because you don't know how to talk to people.
I remember watching a training video from the most successful car salesman ever in the world, and the way he had the most successful track rate of return business, and what he would do was he would actually talk you out of a car that he knew or an extra that wasn't important to you, and by doing that once, it built up that rapport. So he was empathetic to make sure they didn't spend too much money. So then they'd always come back to him because they knew that he was trustworthy by ensuring that they got the right thing for them. So yeah, I definitely think that's very valuable in that.
Yeah, and people, it's not about you. And people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yeah,
and this is where empathy comes into it.
Yeah, well, you always got to care for your clients, and sometimes it's to both of our detriment at times that we care too much, and it costs. But it's essentially in the end, it all comes back around. It always does. Whenever you're doing good deeds, it comes back around.
Well, you do it all the time. You say to me, "Why are you wasting your time with this person?" And it's not a waste of time. It's a learning experience for me.
Yeah. I don't say it quite like that. It's a little bit nicer than that, Brett.
You say it's no value for you to get involved, I think is the word.
Yes, well, that's essentially it, because you've also got to think about the profitability of your business.
Yeah,
and it's just and you've also got people have to help themselves if you're going to help them.
Well, this is why I talk to you. I do it. I would do it if I wasn't getting paid for it.
Yeah.
But this is where. Well, why don't you just do this? You get paid for this.
Yeah, and you still help. You still do a good deed. So
yeah, it's doing the focus. But if you don't have to go out of your way to help people, you can help more people. And this is what a lot of charities fall into. They get pulled out of what their purpose is. And it's a triple bottom line: people, planet, and purpose. All businesses are for profit, even not for profits, have to be able to work and make a profit. Otherwise, they can't service the people they want to help.
Yeah, that's it. And that's the same with you, because you've got to make a profit so you can help more people.
Yeah, so I'm just talking to people at the moment that want to do training with kids in the next generation, that want to employ staff, but they can't afford it. So we're going to give them a VA. So all of this sort of stuff where the skills matching comes into it. But the skills matching system is basically designed to team up over 50 women with school leavers. And the grandparents want to leave something for their kids, for their grandkids. Sorry, they don't want to leave it for their kids. The kids don't want to work for them. So, yeah.
So we're in the wrap up stage now. So Brett, what's next for Inception?
Well, I don't want to give too much away, but local home and garden repairs is about to kick off. We've got the training side of the business as well. I'm using it for my training courses, but there's a lot of other RTOs out there because they see how cost effective it is to use it. So that's going to be something there as well. They want me to come in and help them with their compliance. They're supposed to go out and talk to businesses. Businesses don't want to talk to them. So I just say, well, just do this, or go out there and say to them this, send them this, talk to them about that. So this is where we're spending a lot of our focus. And in regards to the income revenue streams and all this sort of thing with the startups, all of this sort of thing is going to, we're using all the content to start businesses up, start up social enterprises, start up all this other stuff. And it's not that people don't have the money to pay for it. They just don't see the value in it. When there's a lot of free courses and all this sort of stuff out there, but they go and do the free courses. But when they actually want to start their business, this is where they come back and they're willing to pay us.
And this is where we've got to keep releasing more content, and because attention is the currency. It's the key. Where can people find more info on you, Brett? How can they connect?
Well, they can jump on. They can look up local home and garden repairs. That's on Facebook. You'll get a few pages come up, or inception.net.au, Inception Network Australia. So again, why not get the domain name? It was available, obviously because of the movie.
And they can also follow you on LinkedIn.
That's it. Yeah.
So final advice, anything you'd like to say for contractors or business owners looking to scale?
Just do it. Put a plan in place, get rid of the dead wood. Think money in, not money out. Ask the right customer the right question, and then let the inmates run the asylum, which means that, let your customers tell you what you want to do, and then just pick and choose your customers.
We'll make sure that we just say, just make it happen, so we don't violate any copyright laws on the slogan. Thanks, Brett, for joining us, and thank you for putting in these key insights. I know there was a lot of value, there was a lot of gold in this chat, and once again, thank you so much. Listeners, go and follow Brett on all of his socials, and also share out the podcast if you found some value out there. And thank you for tuning in to Attention is the Currency. I'm Daniel Brummelcombe, and I will see you on the next episode.